You've been lied to about Sun Tzu. For decades, entrepreneurs have plastered his quotes on motivational posters. Business gurus quote him in seminars. Everyone treats the art of war like it's a handbook for crushing your enemies and dominating markets. All warfare is based on deception. Appear weak when you are strong. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Sounds badass, right? Here's the problem. You're reading it completely wrong, because Sun Tzu wasn't teaching you how to win wars. He was teaching you how to avoid bankrupting yourself trying to win them. Strip away the mysticism, the strategy memes, and the LinkedIn posts. And you discover something shocking. The art of war isn't a combat manual. It's an economics textbook. To understand Sun Tzu, you have to understand the world he lived in. China, 6th century BCE. This wasn't a unified empire. It was a fractured mess of warring kingdoms, each one convinced it could conquer the others and reunify the realm. And they were all bleeding themselves dry trying. This was the spring and autumn period, transitioning into the warring states era. 300-year arms race that turned warfare from aristocratic chariot duels into industrial-scale slaughter. Armies that once numbered in the hundreds now numbered in the tens of thousands. States weren't just fighting battles anymore. They were running full-scale economic stress tests. Here's what nobody tells you about ancient warfare. Logistics mattered more than tactics. The moment an army left the capital, the cost clock started ticking. Grain for soldiers, fodder for horses, weapons, armor, repair equipment, wagons, porters, blacksmiths, cooks, all moving across supply lines, stretching hundreds of miles. A campaign lasting a few months could bankrupt a small state. A campaign lasting a year could collapse a large one. And because every kingdom was terrified of being conquered, they kept spending anyway. It was an arms race in slow motion, and the entire political system was collapsing under its own weight. This is the crisis Sun Tzu walked into, not as a philosopher sitting in a monastery, but as a crisis manager, trying to stop kingdoms from committing financial suicide. Here's the line everyone ignores in the art of war. War is of vital importance to the state. Most people read that as war is essential. Wrong. Sun Tzu meant war is dangerous, capable of destroying the very society it claims to defend. He spends the entire book explaining how to minimize that danger. When you read it with this lens, everything changes. Supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. That's not mysticism. That's cost avoidance. It's the ancient equivalent of getting the outcome you want without burning capital. No nation has ever benefited from prolonged warfare. That's not philosophy. That's a literal fiscal fact. The longer a war drags on, the more it erodes your state's ability to function. Speed is the essence of war. Not because speed is glorious, but because speed is cheaper. Every day your army sits in the field is another day of expenses piling up. Wages, food, equipment, wear and tear. Victory delayed is money burned. Sun Tzu wasn't obsessed with winning battles. He was obsessed with preventing states from going bankrupt while trying to win them. Let me show you how radical this was. Before Sun Tzu, Chinese warfare was ritualized and honorable. Aristocratic elites fought symbolic battles where prestige mattered more than results. And economic cost barely entered the conversation. But as populations exploded and weapons technology advanced, warfare scaled up into something unrecognizable. States started standardizing currency, reforming tax systems, and building massive bureaucracies just to sustain their armies. War became a national project and an existential financial risk. Sun Tzu saw that the old mindset had become suicidal. War could no longer be a stage for noble gestures. It had become a budgetary threat that required cold, unsentimental analysis. This is why Sun Tzu is so unique in world history. Most military thinkers glorified combat. Sun Tzu treated war like a balance sheet. He calculated supply chain logistics, resource depletion rates, and opportunity cost centuries before economists invented the term. He had zero patience for generals who chase glory at the expense of stability. Because he understood a truth modern leaders often forget. Every decision on the battlefield is ultimately a decision about national solvency. And if you miscalculate, you don't just lose soldiers, you lose the state. When you read The Art of War as an economics manual, it stops sounding like ancient poetry and starts sounding like a financial audit. Sun Tzu opens by listing 5 fundamental factors that determine the outcome of war. The moral law. Heaven, earth, the commander, and method, and discipline. These aren't mystical categories. They're resource management variables. He's asking, how stable is your government? Moral law. What's the economic climate? That's heaven. What terrain advantages exist? That's earth or logistics. How competent is leadership, commander, or risk management? How efficient is your bureaucracy? Method or cost control? He's performing a risk assessment 2,500 years before MBA programs existed. Then he gets brutally specific about logistics. When your army is 20 miles from home, you lose the price of 100 measures of grain. Translation: distance is a cost multiplier. The farther you march, the faster your treasury drains. He warns that transporting supplies costs more than paying troops. Prolonged campaigns collapse the agricultural workforce, and wasteful commanders bankrupt nations while winning meaningless skirmishes. For a military treatise, it's weirdly uninterested in battle and obsessively interested in how much battle costs. Sun Tzu's approach to intelligence reveals the same financial logic. He writes, "What enables the wise, sovereign, and the good general to strike and conquer is foreknowledge, not courage, not strength, information." And here's the economic genius. A single spy can prevent an entire army from marching in the wrong direction. A single intercepted message can save a nation millions. Sun Tzu understood something modern governments forget. Intelligence isn't an accessory to warfare, it's the cheapest weapon available. A misallocation of information is a misallocation of capital. He was the first strategist to recognize that data is leverage. Spend a little on spies, save a fortune on armies. Even his obsession with speed is about economics. Speed is the essence of war. Again, everyone reads this as attack aggressively. Sun Tzu means speed lowers cost. When you move swiftly and strike where unexpected, you're using timing and deception to avoid expensive direct conflict. Every day spent marching, feeding troops, and waiting increases financial exposure. Sun Tzu's preference for flexibility isn't philosophical flair. It's fiscal discipline. That's where this gets uncomfortable. Modern governments still make the same mistakes Sun Tzu tried to prevent. They enter wars without calculating the long-term economic strain. Then they watch their budgets fracture. The Soviet Union and Afghanistan drained the treasury and contributed to the USSR's collapse. The United States and Vietnam cost over $1 trillion in today's money, eroding public trust and economic stability. World War I bankrupted European empires. A war destroyed more wealth than it created. These conflicts weren't lost because armies were weak. They were lost because the economic model behind them collapsed. Sun Tzu would have seen it coming immediately. Prolonged warfare erodes the state faster than the enemy ever could. Meanwhile, the tools he championed, intelligence, deception, rapid operations, strategic maneuvering, have become the backbone of modern strategy. Why? Because they're cheaper cyber warfare? Sun Tzu, economic sanctions. Sun Tzu, proxy wars. Sun Tzu, covert operations. Sun Tzu, all of them aim for maximum effect with minimal financial exposure. The world's most powerful states still operate inside Sun Tzu's framework, whether they admit it or not. Here's the lesson everyone misses. Sun Tzu wasn't teaching rulers how to win wars, he was teaching them how to avoid national bankruptcy. His true genius was understanding that the cost of conflict outlives the conflict itself. States don't fail because they lose battles. States fail because they drain the capital that keeps them coherent, confident, and functional. Victory is irrelevant if your treasury collapses afterward. The best war is the one that doesn't require rebuilding your economy when it's over. The art of war isn't about boldness or aggression, it's about restraint. It's not about overpowering opponents, it's about outlasting them. Sun Tzu doesn't glorify triumph, he glorifies stability. To him, the ruler who preserves resources is wiser than the ruler who conquers cities. The general who wins without fighting is wiser than the general who destroys armies. The state that knows when not to act is stronger than the one that acts out of pride. Sun Tzu's philosophy isn't the philosophy of a warrior. It's the philosophy of a steward, someone responsible for maintaining the long-term solvency of the nation. His message is simple, unsettling, and eternally relevant. Strength isn't measured by how hard you strike, but by how much you can afford to strike. And when financial systems collide, it's not the bravest nation that prevails. It's the most economically disciplined. If this changed how you see strategy, hit that subscribe button. Because history doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it'll cost you all the same. In our next video, we'll ask, why did Rome really fall? Hint, it wasn't the barbarians. You there?